Welcome to the Paul Adefarasin podcast. We revisit the word, surface the big ideas, and give you space to reflect, pray, and act. If you'd like the full message, though, you can watch it on YouTube or listen on Spotify after this episode.
Imagine, right, someone hands you the keys to a multi-million-dollar Ferrari.
Okay, I like where this is going.
Right. You slide into this pristine leather seat, the engine roars to life, you've got a full tank of gas, and a perfectly clear map to your destination.
Sounds like a dream.
It does, but there's just one massive problem.
Which is?
You are 5 years old.
Oh, wow. Yeah, that is a problem.
Exactly. You don't even know what a steering wheel does. Your feet literally can't reach the pedals, and you have, zero concept of traffic laws.
Right. I mean, the map and the fuel don't really matter at that point.
They don't. You don't need a better map. You need maturity.
Yeah.
And today we are looking at why treating your goals, your career, just your life in general, like this brute force hustle is exactly like that 5-year-old trying to merge onto the highway.
It's a disaster waiting to happen.
It is. It's not about doing more. It's about having the capacity to handle what you're doing.
That image, it perfectly captures the central tension we are exploring today.
Yeah, so welcome to this deep dive, everyone. We have got some incredible source material today.
We really do. We are breaking down this highly dynamic, just incredibly layered sermon transcript. It's titled Winning Streaks, Success Momentum, delivered by Pastor Paul Adefarasin at the House on the Rock in Lagos.
And the core argument he makes here is, honestly, it's paradigm shifting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Because if you feel stuck in this cycle of exhaustion or failure or just overwhelming burnout, he argues it's very likely because you're approaching the very concept of your life in the wrong order.
You're prioritizing the doing before you've established the being.
Exactly.
So our mission for this deep dive is to distill these central spiritual truths from his message, break down the foundational scriptures he uses, and this is the best part, extract the exact practical weekday actions.
Right, the stuff you can actually use.
Yeah, including specific frameworks for prayer that you can use to build what he calls success momentum.
Let's get right into it then.
Okay, let's unpack this foundational idea. Because before you can build momentum of any kind, the sermon argues you have to fundamentally understand what you are.
Right. And to do that, Pastor Paul takes the congregation all the way back to Genesis 1.1.
The very beginning.
The very beginning. It starts with redefining human identity through the lens of this Hebrew word, bara.
Bara. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
So in the biblical context, bara refers to God creating something from absolutely nothing.
Like zero raw materials.
Right, zero. He speaks time, space, and matter into existence where none previously existed. He creates the platform of reality itself.
Okay, I follow that.
But then, when the narrative gets to humanity, in Genesis 1.28, the dynamic changes completely.
How so?
Well, God doesn't just make humans as these static objects to, decorate this new universe. He commands them to be fruitful, multiply, fill, and subdue.
Ah, so he hands over a mandate.
Exactly, a mandate to continue the work of creation.
Which means, I guess, we aren't just placed on Earth to exist. We are designed with this architectural blueprint to govern and expand.
Yes, and the sermon draws a really sharp line here between a creature and a creator. And this distinction, it's the hinge for everything else we're going to talk about today.
So what's the difference, practically speaking?
Well, a creature is basically a victim of its environment.
Like an animal.
Right. If a storm rolls in and it starts pouring rain,
Yeah.
a chimpanzee just gets wet.
Yeah.
At best, it finds a tree to hide under. It just reacts to what happens to it.
But a creator operates in an entirely different dimension. Right?
Completely different. A creator doesn't just react to the visible world. A creator pulls from the invisible realm.
Meaning what? Like abstract thought?
Exactly. When a human being looks at that same pouring rain, they don't just hide. They conceive of an abstract thought, this idea of protection from the rain that you can carry with you.
And they manufacture an umbrella.
Right. They look at a massive continent and they create a railroad. They look at the sky and engineer an airplane.
That's powerful.
The pastor really stresses that everything visible around you right now, the device you're listening to this on, the building you're sitting in, it all started as an invisible thought.
The invisible realm is the factory for the visible world.
I love how you put that, yes.
But, I get the theological distinction here, a creator versus a creature reacting to the rain. But honestly, I can hear a lot of people saying this sounds a bit like, I don't know, toxic positivity.
Or manifestation buzzwords.
Exactly. Manifestation buzzwords, because if someone's small business is literally failing or they're drowning in this toxic corporate job, just sitting in their office calling themselves a creator isn't going to magically pay payroll, you know?
Right. It's not going to fix their terrible boss.
Yeah. So how does this theology actually operate without sounding completely out of touch with, like, a miserable Tuesday morning?
That is the exact friction the pastor anticipates. And it's where your Ferrari analogy from the intro comes into full focus.
Oh, the 5-year-old driver.
Yeah. The reason people feel trapped and overwhelmed despite being wired as these powerful creators is because they skip the necessary season of maturity.
They try to drive the Ferrari at age 5.
Exactly. The sermon points out that God always prioritizes being overdoing.
Being overdoing.
Right. If you look at the Gospel of Mark, chapter 3, verse 14, Jesus selects his 12 apostles.
Oh, okay.
But he doesn't immediately hand them this laundry list of miracles to perform and send them out to govern the early church.
He doesn't.
No. The text explicitly says he called them, quote, to be with him first.
To be with him. So the being is the prerequisite for the doing.
It's an apprenticeship of identity.
That makes so much sense. If you jump straight into the doing without knowing who you are, without that internal maturity, the weight of the assignment will actually crush you.
You'll burn out.
Oh.
Because your actions aren't anchored to a solid foundation.
And I imagine that apprenticeship takes time.
It takes a lot of time. God uses time to mature your capacity.
Mm.
So that frustration you feel on that miserable Tuesday morning, it's often just the tension of your doing outpacing your being.
Wow.
You were trying to manifest umbrellas and railroads, metaphorically speaking, but you haven't sat still long enough to understand the invisible mechanics of your own faith.
You have to mature your internal state before God entrusts you with the giant external assignments.
Exactly.
So, assuming we recognize that we are in this, necessary season of maturing, how does that translate to the real world?
What do you mean?
Like, when Monday rolls around and the emails start flooding in, what is the practical output of all this being?
I see. Well, the sermon introduces a fascinating concept here. It's about building what the pastor calls readily available faith.
Readily available faith.
He grounds this deeply in Hebrews 11.1, which begins, now faith is.
Now faith is. Present tense.
Exactly. The emphasis is entirely on the present tense. It isn't this historical artifact, and it isn't some vague hope for the future. It has to be accessible now.
Right.
And he couples this urgency with Ecclesiastes 9.01, noting that time and chance happen to them all.
Meaning everyone gets an opportunity eventually.
Right. A window of time and chance will open for everyone. But that window opens and closes with terrifying speed.
So you have to be ready.
Yes, and the pastor uses this brilliant, intensely practical metaphor here. He compares faith to a fire extinguisher.
A fire extinguisher. I like that.
Yeah, because you absolutely do not wait for your kitchen to catch on fire before you calmly drive down to the hardware store.
Right. Browse the aisles, read some reviews online.
Exactly. Purchase the extinguisher, drive back. By the time you get back, your house is reduced to ash.
You buy the extinguisher in times of peace.
You mount it on a wall so that in the moment of sudden crisis or sudden opportunity, it is readily available.
That is so good. Think about the giants in your inbox right now. The overwhelming tasks, the difficult clients, the financial stress.
Yeah.
When those hit, you literally do not have time to go manufacture courage from scratch.
You don't. And the sermon uses the ultimate ancient case study for this.
Oh, the David and Goliath story?
Yes, but contrasted with the story of the 10 spies in Numbers 13.
Right, the 10 spies.
So the 10 spies are sent to scout out the promised land. And they come back with a deeply pessimistic report.
Because of the giants, right.
Exactly. The land is great, but the current inhabitants are literal giants. Their exact words were, "We were in our own sight as grasshoppers."
Grasshoppers. Wow. They allowed their visible circumstances to completely overwrite their invisible identity.
Perfectly said. But then fast forward to David in 1 Samuel 17. The pastor describes David, kind of humorously, as this teenage pizza boy.
A pizza boy.
Yeah, because he's just showing up to the front lines to deliver cheese and bread to his older brothers.
Right. He wasn't even supposed to be fighting.
Exactly. And he walks right into a standoff with an even more terrifying giant, Goliath. But David's reaction is the polar opposite of those spies.
He doesn't even acknowledge the giant's size as a limiting factor.
No, he doesn't. And the pastor distills why there is such a difference with a line that, honestly, it really stops you in your tracks.
What is it?
He says, doubt is created in the eyes, but faith is created in the ears.
Doubt is created in the eyes, but faith is created in the ears. That is heavy.
It's the crucial diagnostic tool for anyone listening to this. Where are you getting your information?
Right, because the 10 spies walked exclusively by sight.
Exactly. They saw the giant, their eyes fed that data directly to their amygdala, and they just panicked. Their doubt was instantaneous because it was visual.
But David refused to walk by sight.
Right. He operated based on what he had heard from God in his private time as a shepherd.
Because he had spent all those years in the fields, fighting off a lion and a bear when no one was watching?
Exactly. He had been quietly filling his spiritual fire extinguisher during that being phase.
So when the visible giant finally showed up, his faith was already there, locked and loaded.
Lock and load.
So basically, the visible world is just a lagging indicator of the invisible one.
That's a great way to look at it.
If you want to change what you are seeing, you have to change what you are hearing.
Precise.
But, okay, how does this abstract concept of readily available faith spark actual, tangible progress?
Well, this leads into the absolute core of our deep dive today.
Yeah.
The mechanics of success momentum.
Success momentum. Break that down for us.
The sermon defines success momentum as a self-reinforcing, compounding cycle. It isn't just a one-off lucky break.
It's a chain reaction.
Right. A chain reaction where your internal thoughts crystallize into ideologies. Then those ideologies dictate your daily actions.
Actions become habits.
Exactly. And your habits ultimately harden into a lifestyle that determines your destiny. In this cycle, every small win gives you the kinetic energy to tackle the next slightly larger obstacle.
But there's a terrifying flip side to this, right? Because momentum works in both directions.
Yes, unfortunately. There's also failure momentum.
And what does that look like?
It's a downward gravitational spiral. It's defined by stagnation and compounding setbacks. When you are trapped in failure momentum, the smallest task feels insurmountable.
And the engine of that failure momentum is something the pastor calls the restart gap, isn't it?
Yes, the restart gap. This is the window of time between when you experience a setback and when you finally muster the courage to try again.
I know that gap well.
We all do. And the longer you sit in that gap, overthinking and analyzing your failure, the harder it becomes to move.
Analysis paralysis.
Exactly. Inaction becomes your new default habit.
It's exactly like going to the gym.
Oh, how so?
Well, if you miss one day of working out, going back the next day isn't a big deal. The friction is really low.
Right, you just go.
But if you get sick and miss, 3 weeks, stepping through those gym doors feels like moving a mountain.
It really does.
The physical weights didn't actually get any heavier, but the psychological friction multiplied tenfold. The weight of inaction builds up in your mind.
That is the restart gap in action. Perfect example.
So if someone is listening to this right now and they realize, hey, I am deep in this failure loop, the gym feels impossible, the project at work feels doomed, how do they force the momentum to flip?
You flip it by completely abandoning the desire for a massive overnight victory.
No overnight success.
None. You have to manufacture your own momentum through the celebration of tiny, almost ridiculous milestones.
Ridiculous milestone.
Yes. Yeah. The pastor shares this incredible piece of church history to illustrate this point.
About the House on the Rock Cathedral.
Yes. When they were building this massive multi-million-dollar structure, they didn't wait until the roof was on and the air conditioning was running to celebrate.
Right, because if they had waited for the final product, the sheer scale of the project would have crushed them with failure momentum.
Precisely. So they celebrated the dirt.
They celebrated dirt.
Literally.
Yeah.
Their very first major milestone was simply taking a waterlogged, swampy piece of land and filling it with sand.
It's just sand.
That was it. Just an empty lot full of sand. But they set up a tent, brought the entire congregation together, clapped their hands, and held a massive service of Thanksgiving just to celebrate the sand.
That is wild.
And then they celebrated putting up a basic perimeter wall. Then they celebrated paying 52 million naira for the foundation.
Which is just concrete under the ground, right?
Exactly. It consisted of ground beams and over 400 piles driven deep into the earth. It was millions of dollars buried underground where no one could even see it.
Wow.
But they celebrated the invisible structure because they knew it was holding up the future visible reality.
Oh.
They recognized that consistency beats intensity every single time.
They were actively operating as creators.
Yes.
They took the invisible vision of the cathedral, and every single time a tiny piece of it manifested into visible matter, they used celebration to refill their spiritual fire extinguisher.
And that joy provided the momentum for the next phase of the build.
Okay, so we've laid down the theological floorboards here. We understand we need to prioritize maturing our being. We need to stockpile readily available faith by guarding what we hear.
Right.
And we need to relentlessly celebrate the tiny wins to reverse engineer success momentum.
Exactly.
Now, how does the pastor actually challenge his congregation to apply this on a regular Wednesday afternoon?
Well, he outlines a very specific 3-part weekday action plan.
Let's break these down as concrete steps of faith. What's step 1?
Action number 1 is aggressive. Audit your circle of reference.
Audit your circle. Okay.
You have to take a harsh, objective look at the voices you allow into your life on a daily basis.
Yeah.
The pastor instructs the listener to deliberately weed out the scoffers.
The scoffers.
The overly religious folks who focus on rules rather than the relationship, and the fearful people who constantly talk down your vision.
That makes sense. Because if faith is created in the ears, then doubt is also a contagion caught through the ears.
It is highly contagious.
Why do we keep people around who are constantly pointing out the size of the giant when we are trying to become David?
Right, you can't afford that noise.
If you want success momentum, you have to curate an echo chamber of faith. You need people who reflect the bigness of God, not the bigness of the obstacle.
Which naturally leads to action number 2, which he calls time travel.
Time travel. Okay, explain that.
Once you've audited your circle and cleared out the pessimistic noise, what are you supposed to be listening to?
Good question.
The pastor tells the congregation to look at data. He challenges them to project where their industry, their city, and the global economy will be in 20 years.
So wait, if I'm a software developer, the pastor is saying I shouldn't just be reacting to the bug reports on my desk today.
Exactly.
I need to look at the hard data regarding where, say, artificial intelligence is projected to be in 2045.
Right. You take that 20-year forecast, you align it with biblical principles of stewardship and creation, and then you come back to the present moment.
And write my code today with the conviction that I am building the architecture for that future reality.
Yes. You're acting as a creator, pulling the invisible future into the present.
That is a profound synthesis of spiritual vision and practical market research.
It really is. You build a future now, so that when the rest of the world finally arrives at that destination, you are already established as the prophetic model.
Wow.
But looking at 20-year data isn't enough to permanently alter your daily habits. You have to physically rewire your brain to believe in that data.
And how do you do that?
That is why the pastor brings up action number 3, write the word.
Write the word. Okay, this one blew my mind when I read the transcript because it bridges ancient biblical practice with modern neuroscience.
It's fascinating.
He references Deuteronomy 17.18. In the Old Testament, when a king finally took the throne, the priests didn't just hand him a pre-written copy of the Bible.
Oh, they did.
The king was legally required to sit down and physically write out a complete copy of the law for himself.
Right, and the pastor explains the profound neurological benefit of this ancient practice.
Tell us about that.
Well, in today's terms, typing notes on a keyboard or a phone screen might increase neuroplasticity, which is the brain's ability to form new neural connections by a single digit.
Just a little bit.
Right, but physically writing words out in cursive, where the letters are continuously joined together, that increases neuroplasticity tenfold.
Tenfold.
Yeah.
Just by writing in cursive.
Yes. The act of cursive writing engages multiple brain regions simultaneously, literally anchoring the text deeper into your cognitive framework.
So you are taking the invisible, abstract thoughts of God, and you are physically manifesting them into the visible world with ink on a page.
It is literal practice for being a creator.
When you write out your vision or a piece of scripture, you aren't just taking notes. You are establishing your internal ideology.
You are filling the fire extinguisher.
Filling the fire extinguisher. I love that.
And that physical discipline brings us to the final and perhaps most vital component of this deep dive.
The prayer points.
Exactly. The physical action plan requires a spiritual engine to sustain it. The pastor closes the sermon with a series of targeted prayer points.
But we should clarify, it is crucial to understand that these are not, passive, obligatory religious duties where you just bow your head and hope for the best.
No, not at all.
The sermon frames these prayers as aggressive, intentional acts of trust that actively generate momentum.
That's a great way to frame it. So the first prayer point centers on a very subtle but powerful shift in vocabulary.
Yielding versus surrendering.
Yes. Praying for yielding, not surrendering. The pastor makes a sharp distinction here. Surrender is what you do when you are defeated.
Right, you surrender to a conquering enemy because you have no other choice. Your resources are exhausted.
But yielding is a proactive, voluntary choice made from a position of strength.
Think of yielding in traffic. You have the capacity to keep driving, but you intentionally give the right of way to a higher authority.
Exactly. When you pray to yield, you are making the strategic daily choice to hand the sovereign authority of your mind, your hands, and your business over to Christ.
You aren't giving up. You are aligning your creator mandate with the ultimate creator.
Beautifully said. Now, the second prayer point is praying for precision.
Precision. Because we all have a tendency to pray these vague, sweeping prayers, right? God bless my business, or God give me a good week.
Yeah, we've all done that.
The pastor challenges the listener to ask God for the specific, peculiar details of their assignment.
He uses an agricultural metaphor for this. He says, if you are a seed right now, don't just pray to grow.
What do you pray for?
Pray for the exact, detailed process of how to become a tree and eventually how to multiply into a forest.
Oh, wow. And the psychological benefit of praying for precision is that it utterly destroys the analysis paralysis we talked about earlier.
It does.
When you have divine precision regarding the exact nature of your assignment, you know exactly what your next step is. You know what tiny pile of sand you were supposed to be celebrating today.
Precision eliminates the restart gap because it removes the confusion.
And finally, the third prayer point takes the focus entirely off yourself.
Right. It is interceding for the kairos window.
Kairos, that's the Greek word for the opportune, appointed moment, right?
Yes, it's that window of time and chance we discussed earlier. But here, you aren't just praying for your own window to open. You are interceding for your neighbor, your peers, your community.
You are praying that when their specific window of opportunity cracks open, they don't freeze.
Exactly. You are asking God to ensure they have the readily available faith to seize the moment without hesitation.
So they don't wander in the wilderness of missed opportunities like the 10 spies did.
It is an act of communal faith. Ultimately, these prayers are the highest expression of the being phase.
You are spending time with the source of your identity so that when Monday morning demands doing, your actions are infused with His power and precision.
That's the goal.
So let's step back and look at the entire landscape we've just covered today.
That's a lot of ground.
It is. We started by reclaiming our fundamental identity. We are creators mandated to pull the invisible into the visible, not mere creatures reacting to the storms of life.
Right.
We learned that the doing must always be preceded by the maturity of being.
The 5-year-old in the Ferrari.
Exactly. We talked about mounting our spiritual fire extinguisher on the wall by building readily available faith, remembering that doubt is a virus caught in the eyes, but faith is a conviction built in the ears.
Such a powerful quote.
Then we broke down the mechanics of momentum, discovering that the only way to escape the gravitational pull of failure and the restart gap is to aggressively celebrate the tiny, sandy wins.
Just celebrate the dirt. And we translated all of that into a concrete weekday protocol.
Audit your circle.
Remove the contagion of scoffers. Time travel 20 years into the future with hard data and bring that reality back to the present.
Write out your vision and the word in cursive to rewire your brain's neuroplasticity.
And anchor all of this by actively yielding your daily routine to God, demanding precision, and interceding for the opportunities of those around you.
It all comes back to a single profound truth from this sermon. True progress isn't about how hard you can hustle or how many items you can cross off a frantic to-do list.
No, it's not.
It is entirely about who you are becoming in the invisible realm, long before the results ever show up in your bank account or your career.
The Ferrari requires a mature driver. You have to become the person capable of holding the blessing before the blessing can safely be handed to you.
Which leaves you with a final thought to mull over as you step back into the reality of your week.
What's that?
Well, if everything in the visible world was once an invisible thought, take a hard look at the life you're currently experiencing.
Okay.
What invisible momentum, whether success or failure, have you been quietly building in your own mind? And more importantly, what is one tiny, seemingly insignificant win you can celebrate today to shift the direction of that momentum?
Thank you for listening. To go deeper, watch the full message on YouTube or listen to the full-length sermon on Spotify. Follow the podcast, and please share it with someone who needs it and leave your response in the Q&A. Kindly keep your heart on fire, your eyes on Jesus, knowing you are the exception. Grace and peace. We love you deeply.